WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and result around here for the Baltimore Orioles. It took a Thursday night, a chilly night from all that I could tell up in the Bronx. And the Yankees, we'll see how it goes over the weekend, but at least the Orioles got the first one, Luke Jones, and for that we'll all be grateful. But it was not without some nervousness, even in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, even amidst the big lead, right?
Well, and there's always going to be nervousness when you're talking about what the Yankees lineup has become again. I mean, it was that nice 4 to 5 year period where the Yankees weren't terrible, but they certainly didn't have that lineup that scared the you-know-what out of you.
Yeah, you were pretty convinced Teixeira was going to strike out most of the time at the end, right?
Yeah. I mean, you were talking about Teixeira and Jacoby Ellsbury, and you just go down the list.
A-Rod.
Yeah, a bunch of guys that were past their prime, could still do some damage from time to time, but didn't terrify you in the way that the Yankees lineup started to do last year. And then, they added Giancarlo Stanton to the mix. So every single one of those 27 outs from this point moving forward over at least the next few years, if not longer than that, are going to be an absolute adventure. And I think you look at Thursday night's game after what happened to the Orioles in the Bronx last year. And I went back and looked at this. I think a lot of fans, a lot of people who watched that tried to put it out of their memory. The Orioles pitching gave up 102 runs.
That's all.
In 10 games at Yankee Stadium last year.
That's all.
10 runs a game.
How many did Tillman pitch? How many did Jimenez pitch last year?
It was basically everyone. I'm not sure Bundy had a start in the Bronx where he gave up a lot of runs, but I know Gausman was bombed there a couple times. Tillman had that one Saturday game.
I remember that one.
Yeah, I mean, it was just an utter disaster. And what happened on Thursday night? Andrew Cashner came out and set the tone. I mean, he pitched with confidence. Now, granted, it's a cold night at Yankee Stadium. I think both starting pitchers benefited from that. But Cashner had 5 pitches that he used effectively. Thought his slider and his changeup specifically were really, really good. And the one blemish was the Aaron Judge home run. And go back and look at that pitch. It wasn't the worst pitch in the world that Aaron Judge hit out. We just know how strong that guy is. So Cashner gives them as good of a start as you can reasonably expect at Yankee Stadium against that lineup. And then finally, the Orioles break through with 5 runs in the 7th, which those 5 runs in the 7th, more than they had scored in 5 of their first 6 games, period. So really nice win. A stop the bleeding kind of win. You got to see how the rest of the weekend goes, of course. One win doesn't forgive losing 5 in a row, but I like to call it that stop the bleeding victory and gives you a chance to briefly exhale and maybe the sky isn't completely falling after all.
He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. Of course, all of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. Branches now throughout Baltimore. Of course, they're providing our community and charity series on Thursdays, along with our pals at Cole Roofing. I've got my Royal Farms Kona Blend inside of the Cole Roofing mug here, but I'm enjoying that and enjoying an Oriole victory as well. And Luke, let me just say this: that game at one point it looked like it might go like $155, right? Like literally, they were cruising along at 8:15 in the 7th inning, and I'm like, wow, this is some hasty baseball. And an hour and a half later, we're changing pitchers, we're going 3-2, we're stepping off the mound, we're doing all the histrionics because the game was very much in the balance as the Yankees brought the tying run to the on-deck circle, to home plate. At various points, it just felt like a double down the line, and this one's going to go 13 innings, right?
Yeah, it really did. And keep in mind, it had that weird 6:35 start, which the Yankees are doing for weeknight games in April, which I think is hilarious considering they have problems with people getting to the Bronx for 7:05 starts during the week. But
it's insane. When I'm in New York, just getting to the ballpark's like, you got to be kidding me, right? You find yourself in Midtown at 5:15, and you're like, how am I getting there? Right, exactly.
Right. So, I mean, I understand the theory behind having an earlier start in April. I assume it's to maybe make it easier for some kids to go to games, but I don't know.
I think it's also easier to get home after the game than if the game ended at 9:15. You stand a chance of getting the kids in bed at 10 o'clock, right?
Yeah. So that game absolutely had a feel to maybe being 2.5 hours. But after that, you kind of were brought back to reality of 2018 Major League Baseball, where each team's using multiple relievers, and each pitch has quite a bit of meaning. And certainly Michael Gibbons and then Darren O'Day after him getting into hot water big time.
Dude, it went 315, didn't it? Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Woo!
Yeah. I mean, you weren't the only one who noticed that. I mean, I was looking at that and saying, wow, I mean, it's...
But it was fast. It went from very fast to very slow very quickly. Well, and that's the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, I guess, of any game when the Orioles are haven't won in a week and are willing to do whatever they need to do in the bullpen, including, by the way, O'Day's mustache. Come on, man. Come on. That's the worst mustache I've seen since mine. You know?
Well, I think it's kind of classic in that regard, right? I mean, there are no good mustaches other than, Tom Selleck, I guess. But
your dad had a good one, though. I saw that.
My dad did have a good mustache.
My dad never had a mustache.
Credit for that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you just look at the game. I mean, Tanaka was, even though I think he threw some hittable pitches over the course of the night that the Orioles didn't take advantage of until the 7th inning, he allowed, one base runner from the 2nd through the 6th inning. Cashner only gave up 2 hits. So, I mean, you had a pitcher stool going. And then, like I said, 2018 modern baseball catches up to you with both sides throwing out 3 relievers after that. So it definitely was hairy. I mean, there's no doubt.
And 3 relievers throwing a lot of pitches, by the way. Nobody was getting in and out of innings in 6 pitches,
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, even the Orioles, Orioles bullpen only gives up 1 run, but Givens, 26 pitches. O'Day, 28 pitches over an inning and a third. Brock had a relatively uneventful. He walked 1 batter, but overall Brock was pretty good. But then you look on the other side: Green, 20 pitches, Warren, 17 pitches, Betances, 18 pitches. I mean, it was, it was not exactly hasty, uneventful pitching from either bullpen, needless to say. But hey, the Orioles get it done, and they'll come away with the victory and end the 5-game losing streak, and now you're hoping Kevin Gausman can get back on track because they need a much better outing from him because they used their top 3 bullpen arms in this game. I mean, that's just the reality of where they are right now. That's why when you see Givens struggling 2nd straight time out, you think about this bullpen. They're already without Zach Britton. We've talked at length the last couple days about them having 2 Rule 5 pitchers in that bullpen. You can't afford to have one of your top 3 most reliable pitchers who are healthy right now. You can't afford to have one of those guys really laboring the way Givens has the last couple times.
Hey, dude, on those Rule 5 guys, I've started to think about this a little bit more later in the week that, all right, if we're going to lose a game early in the balance, let's find out what we have with these kids early on and cut bait one way or another if they're going to send either one or both of these kids packing or to the DL or whatever shenanigans they're going to pull at the major league level that are going to be appropriate. There is a feeling, though, about both of those cats now that they're damaged goods, right? Like that you're not going to bring them into a 3-3 game at Yankee Stadium on Saturday, right? Like they'll be the last guy. They're in that Ubaldo, I don't want to say the doghouse, but we might as well just call it the Jimenez house. But he's the last guy we're going to go get at this point. And that's not a great place to be a week into the season, to your point, where you're already hiding these guys because you brought them out into the bright lights and it didn't go so well.
Yeah, but that I agree with you in theory, but at the same time, we know Buck Showalter's not going to put his top guys in jeopardy, especially this early in the season. It's one thing to talk about August and September when you might push some of your best relievers a little bit more, but he's not going to do that in April. So believe me, I'm not saying Pedro Arujo, man, I am.
By the time you learn how to not pronounce his name, he's going to be gone. Right, exactly, right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and Nestor Cortez, I mean, believe me.
Pronounce that properly now. That's with an O, O-R, N-E-S-T-O-R.
I mean, Buck's not using either of those guys as his top choice, but at the same time, Givens and O'Day, we already talked about it. Look at the number of pitches they threw Thursday night. Not saying those guys aren't available whatsoever on Friday, but even if they are, then they're definitely not available Saturday. So you just run into this issue that if you're going to have these Rule 5 pitchers in the bullpen, especially 2, if you can hide one and you really like Arujo, then, and he has the better arm, by the way. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, he can get it up to the mid-90s, has some decent secondary stuff. I get the intrigue with him, but to to have him and Cortez and to expect to be able to get away with not using either of those guys in some at least medium leverage situations, you're kidding yourself. So, I mean, that's going to be an issue for them no matter how long they decide to go down this road. And who knows, maybe a week or two from now they make a decision to move on. And someone's going to have to go for Alex Cobb coming off or being recalled and being placed on the 25-man roster. So maybe it's one of those guys. Who knows? But it's definitely going to be an issue, and that's why it was so important for this team to get the win on Thursday night, because anytime you're using Givens, O'Day, and Brock in the same game, you have to win. Anytime you're going to use those three and you don't come away with a victory, you just think about it, okay, you missed a golden opportunity that night, and then what does that mean for the next couple games after that? So it's very much a challenge, and you hope that Miguel Castro and Richard Blyer can be close to what they were a year ago. Makes the bullpen better, but again, having those two Rule 5 arms, it makes things very, very challenging for Buck Showalter, who I'm sure in a perfect world would have no part of having two Rule 5 pitchers in his bullpen.
Well, I mean, we're speaking the truth around here. Who knows what's going on inside the organization? But at least for now, the bleeding stops on a night where, the bats came to life in one inning. The Yankees threw the ball around a little wild. But the Yankees aren't hitting the ball well either. This might not have been a bad time to be rolling into New York and saying, hey, Gausman, go get him on a Friday night against CC. By the way, Gausman, Tillman, and Wright now awaiting the Yankees this weekend. It's certainly not a good pitching matchup weekend for them, and they are sitting at 2-5 right now. And then we'll come home and play the Blue Jays here on Monday.
Yeah, and really with Kevin Gausman, who are you going to get? Is it going to be the guy that pitched poorly on Sunday against the Twins? Is it going to be the guy who struggled mightily against the Yankees in 2017, or are you going to get the guy who pitched so well in the second half last year, the guy who pitched exceptionally well against the Yankees 2 years ago? Now, the Yankees have undergone some pretty substantial change since then, but the point is Kevin Gausman's perfectly capable of going to Yankee Stadium and pitching really, really well. He's done it in the past, but they really need him to pitch well. As I said, as much as you don't like the results last Sunday against the Twins, I was concerned about his velocity. I mean, his velocity was down a good bit from what his typical average fastball is. It was almost 3 full miles. Now, it's one start. It's not unheard of for a pitcher to have that, but if he's out there on Friday night throwing 92, 93 again, then that's a red flag to me that, hey, is there something going on with this guy physically? Is there something really amiss with his mechanics that he's not throwing hard? Those are going to be some real questions if he's not out there throwing 95, 96. I mean, it's really, really difficult to win if you're not going to have your best stuff and you're not going to command the fastball and your secondary pitches the way you need to. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, even if you get a good start from Gausman, certainly not feeling that great about Tillman. And as much as Mike Wright pitched well against the Astros, I'm not. If I'm a betting man, I'm not betting on him doing that again against that Yankees lineup. So if you can get this Friday night win, you get at a point where at worst you're coming home with the split. The sky's not falling quite as badly then, but get the first game here. You got a reasonable chance now. If you can get some decent pitching, that you can, like I said, no worse than a split, and you'd really like to come away with the series win. You'd feel much, much better about that first week of the season being as poor as it was, and your record starting to look better coming home then to face the Blue Jays.
I guess other concerns for the team right now, Cobb coming in and a pitcher going out, that's going to be an easy thing. But they don't have a lineup yet, right? I mean, the Chris Davis thing became a headline, that right. He's not going to bat leadoff. Well, who is? And I'm one of those guys, and I'm the old school. I'm mowing the lawn right now, yelling at you to get off it, young man. And that's all well and good. And I don't need an Al Bunbury and a 310 George Brett hitter in the 3-hole. I don't need to go left, right. I don't need to have any of those axioms. But I would like to have a lineup. Whatever you think the modern vernacular is, and whether it's Renicky and Lowenstein platooning or whatever Caleb Joseph and Cisco are going to do, and however you're going to match it up with, I'm fine with all that. But just let me know if I'm coming to the ballpark. Am I playing, and where am I playing, and how am I batting, and who am I batting, and why? And I think ball players like that. And I know it's early, but this wasn't thought of in the offseason, nor has it really been for 5 years, where it's a beer league softball lineup, kind of no matter how you put it, because you don't have Al Bumbry leading off anymore.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the funny thing is, when you look around baseball, there are lots of unconventional lineups. Now, that said, the Orioles are a pretty extreme example of not having a conventional leadoff hitter. You don't see many guys like Brett Gardner around baseball anymore. I mean, that's just kind of becoming a lost art. And even though Gardner's not swinging the bat well to begin the season, I think you typically know what you're going to get.
Well, if you don't hit 20 home runs, they don't want you on the team, right?
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing as well. But from an on-base percentage standpoint, that you look at the Orioles and you don't have that logical fit. I mean, Machado did it 3 years ago with a lot of success, but clearly you want to have him in the number 2 or number 3 spot. I think that's reasonable. Scope, same thing with him. I think Mancini's probably the right guy for that job right now. In a perfect world, you'd like to have him in more of a run-producing spot, but you need to have someone there that's productive. And as much as by no means was I a fan of Chris Davis in the leadoff spot, I at least understood the point of him having a career on base percentage just shy of 330, which is a lot better than most of the guys in the lineup. And the idea of maybe this gets him going in a different way, it clearly wasn't. And we understand that. I mean, he did get his second hit of the year on Thursday night, but he's looked so lost at the plate. And I think the bigger issue for me, more so than just talking about the leadoff spot, which I'm not saying is completely insignificant, because whoever's hitting leadoff is going to get more plate appearances over the course of the season than anyone else. I mean, it's it's simple math. But the batting order a lot of times is overblown. People make more out of it than how it truly matters. But the bigger issue for me is the Orioles need to start getting some production from their veteran left-handed hitters. It isn't just Davis. Colby Rasmus has looked just as bad as Chris Davis. In fact, he struck out, I think, 11 of his first 20 plate appearances this year. He has struck out.
What's the real expectation on him? I mean, he was just sitting out there amongst many guys, just sitting out there. You can pluck them, and the guys like him and the Pedro Alvarez, they're a dime a dozen. There's a reason they're available, right?
Well, I mean, Colby Rasmus has had a decent career. I mean, it's not as though this guy's been a complete scrub. I know you look at the career 240 average, but he's been a guy who has had an on-base percentage markedly higher than his career batting average. He's been a guy who's hit 20-plus home runs in seasons. I think the big question for him, I mean, he had the hip issue last year. He walked away / retired / quit, whatever you want to call it, on the Tampa Bay Rays last year. So it was really a case of where is he physically, and I think more so, where is he mentally? Now, by all accounts, I mean, the reviews have been fine as far as him in the clubhouse and, having that, quote, 1-2 that Buck Showalter likes to see in a player. But, I mean, he missed half the season last year. He only played in 37 games last season. As far as, he walked away over the summer from the game. So, I mean, I think 20 plate appearances, I mean, that's way too soon to judge anyone, but at the same time, he's got to produce, and especially in the context of knowing that Mark Trumbo is not that far away from coming back. He's going to be the primary DH, I think, in a perfect world. I mean, certainly you got to see him swing much better than he did last year, but you can't afford to have these extreme split guys. I mean, right now the Orioles have 2 left-handed bats, Colby Rasmus and Pedro Alvarez, who are not going to face left-handed pitching if Buck has any way of avoiding it. So, I mean, that just leaves you with a really limited roster in terms of flexibility. Now, in Rasmus' defense, he can play some pretty good defense at least, but again, how much is that worth if any time the opposition brings in a left-handed reliever, you're going to be looking to pinch hit for the guy. So they need to they need to start getting some production from these veteran left-handed bats. The most left-handed production they've gotten to this point in the season has been from Chance Sisco and Anthony Santander. And it's not as though either of those guys are swinging the bat all that well. It's just they've at least delivered a couple hits here and there. So they really need to get that. Once you get at least one or two of these guys swinging the bat okay, then the lineup becomes far less painful to try to fill out. But I think in the meantime, by no means is it necessarily set in stone moving forward, I think you are going to see Mancini in that leadoff spot. And I think we talked about this last week when Buck Showalter initially put Chris Davis in the leadoff role on opening day. He went out of his way to mention the possibility of Mancini as a leadoff hitter and said that didn't think he looked all that comfortable in the role when they tried it in the spring. But Chris Davis starting off the way he did can quickly change your mind about something. And I think Buck mentioning that at the time kind of gave you the tell that he was at least thinking about Mancini in that role, and I think we're going to see that for now, and Mancini certainly responded favorably with 3 hits on Thursday night.
By the way, Machado's been awful, Beckham's been awful, Davis has been awful. I have expectations of Mancini, but they're not what they were last year. Scope and Jones have been fine, right? And I guess that's there, but I guess we'll see Machado heat up at some point. This wouldn't be a bad weekend for him to do that.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And Manny held court on Thursday, even took a little dig at the New York media for the whole Aaron Judge tampering thing, which I question how smart it is to do that, especially if you fancy yourself being in pinstripes next year, that you're already tweaking the media, even if he's completely right about that, by the way. But, yeah, I mean, they're still waiting for some of these guys to start heating up. I mean, Jones has been really good. All 3 of his home runs have been, in the late 6th inning or later, and have given the Orioles a lead, all 3 of those home runs. Scope has hit the ball much better after looking dreadful in that Minnesota series. Mancini had 3 hits on Thursday night, so you're hoping he's coming out of it. And as you mentioned, Machado hasn't done anything yet. I think he's slugging .259 at the moment. We know about Chris Davis. We've talked about Rasmus. Beckham had the meaningless home run against the Twins last Saturday night. So, yeah, I mean, it's good to see them come alive the way they did in the 7th inning with that 5-run inning, but they're very clearly still waiting to be firing on all cylinders with that offense, and they haven't come close to that just yet, and they're going to need it. And to your point, you need Machado to get going. I mean, this is your MVP candidate. This is the guy that you're hoping is either going to lead you to the playoffs one last time or is going to hit so well that you can trade him in late July and get a couple pieces to help you for the future. But the way he's hit so far, and it's early, we know that, but has left something to be desired. Not exactly driving the ball, just 1 extra base hit so far this season for Manny Machado.
Baltimore Brigade are going to begin their season next week. I am wearing the hat. Make sure you're getting out to BaltimoreBrigade.com and checking out what they're doing down at the Royal Farms Arena. Also want to give a shout-out to our friends out at Michael's Cafe for the great crab cakes and the split-level soup last week. I have not gotten a steak there, but they're telling me that that's the next thing I'm getting when I'm there. Stop by Michael's Cafe. They're going to have the outdoor area open. I swear the cold weather's going to go away soon. You know where it is, Timonium Road and York Road across from the fairgrounds. Speaking of fairgrounds, Maryland Jockey Club also sponsoring WNST and all that we're doing. They are racing this weekend and every weekend at Laurel right on up until May when they're going to move things up to Hi-Ho Pimlico. That'll be Preakness weekend as well as the Black Eyed Susan and the Pink Festival. All the details, all the entries at the front of WNST.net as well as in our morning newspaper. All that's brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Birds taking on the Yankees all weekend long. We'll be on it. If there's any breaking news, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. That's when they decide to finally get rid of Nestor Cortez. It'll all be brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Of course, Dennis Colatzos is here on Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. I'm a very available individual. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live right here on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.